Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever really thought about the whole process of starting something new, like an organization, adapting when things change, and, really connecting with the community?
Yeah.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into planting missional ministries.
Hmm.
The source material is this really fascinating document with the same name. It's basically a roadmap for starting new churches.
Right.
But honestly, it's packed with so much practical advice, surprising insights, stuff that goes way beyond just churches.
That's what's so interesting, isn't it? That universality, these ideas about church planting, they're not just for faith groups. They offer, I think, incredible lessons for any organization.
Like a startup or a nonprofit.
Exactly. A startup, a community group, anything looking to grow, adapt, and actually make an impact, especially in these really diverse, dynamic places we see today.
Mm.
And it brings up a big question for anyone listening, really. How do you genuinely understand and connect with the people you're trying to reach? So our mission today, kind of, is to pull out those core insights and show how they apply much more broadly, no matter what kind of thing you're trying to start.
Okay, sounds good. So where should we start? Maybe with an example.
Yeah, the source uses a powerful one.
New York City. The source quotes Tim Keller saying, New York continues to be the single most influential city in the U.S. and perhaps in the world.
A big statement.
Yeah, and he adds, in general, as this city goes, so goes U.S. society. But here's where it gets really interesting, talking about the shifts happening there.
The demographics.
Exactly. How NYC changed from, historically maybe an Irish, Italian, Jewish city, his words, into this incredibly multi-ethnic place. People coming mainly from the southern and eastern hemispheres, where he notes Christianity is growing fastest.
And he sees a potential there.
Yeah, a potential to radically change NYC from a largely secular city to a faith-filled city through church planting. It's a bold vision tied to that demographic reality.
And if you connect that New York example to the bigger picture, it's not just NYC, is it?
No, definitely not.
The source explains how that old mission strategy, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, ends of the earth, it's often outdated now
Why is that?
because of what they call the emerging global world. Basically, global diversity landing right in your local community.
Ah, so all those places are now kind of mixed together.
Exactly. You've got all these different groups in one geographical area. The document calls it, kind of cleverly, Jerusalem, Judea, Samarians, all in one spot.
Okay.
And the point is, each cultural segment will require an approach that speaks its particular cultural language.
That makes sense.
So the takeaway for, well, any venture is just saying, oh, we're open to everyone can be pretty careless if you don't have a real strategy, one that actually understands and accommodates that diversity.
Yeah, you can't just assume people will walk in and feel like it's for them.
Which leads to this challenge, right? Founders picking models based on, I don't know, what's trendy or what worked for a friend somewhere else.
Totally. Without really getting their own community first. And you end up with this huge mismatch. Like the source says, maybe they have an outreach plan to reach Saddleback Sam, but their town is filled with blue-collar Bob.
Huh. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Selling snow shovels in the desert, like you said earlier.
Right.
But the source points to a better way for the people who manage to break the code, as they put it.
Okay, what's the code-breaking strategy?
Well, first, learn the context before picking the methods. There's this great quote from one planner who, when asked about their model, just said, don't know yet, have not spent enough time with the people.
Wow. That takes patience.
Yeah.
And humility.
Second, they learn from others, sure, but without copying them wholesale. They modify, adapt. And third, they learn from predecessors, maybe successful movements or companies from the past, but they adapt those older models to new cultural realities. Like seeker-sensitive today probably doesn't mean the same thing it did in 1980, right? So this raises a key question for anyone listening. How do you keep evaluating your methods? How do you keep asking, is there a better way, a better model that would actually reach my community while staying true to the core mission?
Okay, so let's get practical. What does this mean for actually, getting a new venture off the ground? Church, startup, whatever. The document talks about models, methods, and this really important idea called milestones.
Right. Let's break those down. Models are basically the different structures your new thing might take. Methods are the ways you actually grow your community or customer base, like how you bring people in.
Got it. And milestones.
Milestones are the key strategic benchmarks. They guide your progress, making sure you're actually ready for the next big step, not just rushing ahead.
Okay. So let's dig into the models first. What kind of structures are we talking about?
Sure. The document lays out a few common ones. First is pioneering. Think classic startup. Very leadership-driven, entrepreneurial. The new thing could look a lot like a parent organization or be totally different.
Okay, like starting from scratch.
Pretty much. Then there's branching. That's more like hiving off a core group from something that already exists.
Like a spin-off company.
Kind of, yeah. And it works best, they say, when the new leader, the core group, the community you're targeting, the philosophy, even the style, when it's all really similar to the parent organization.
Makes sense. Less friction.
Right. Then partnering. That's cooperating with one or maybe more established organizations. They might share values, provide some funding or resources, prayer support in the church context. But the main leadership still comes from the new launch team itself.
Okay. And then there was one called restarting. That sounded interesting.
Yeah, restarting is fascinating. It's trying to revive organizations that are struggling or maybe just outdated.
Like those California examples they mentioned.
Yeah.
50s and 60s churches that didn't adapt.
Exactly. Leaders retiring, demographics shifting, and the organization failing to take on a new California face, as they put it. Restarting, the source says, often requires death and a completely new birth.
Wow. Death and new birth. Intense.
It is. Often means closing the doors for, say, 6 months or more, bringing in totally new staff, new leadership, fresh vision.
That's a major overhaul.
Totally. And the source makes this point. In the future, many organizations will need to be restarted if their original purpose is to be fulfilled. That's a provocative thought.
Definitely. And the last model.
Catalyzing. This is about creating whole movements of organizations, maybe focused on a specific demographic or a population segment or a particular cultural setting, usually involves a specific framework or teaching structure being replicated.
So multiple ventures spinning out from one core idea.
Right. What's really insightful across all these models is how they highlight this basic principle. Your structure needs to fit your resources, your network, and your goals. Are you a pioneer, a branch, a partner, a restarter, or a catalyst? Choosing wrong up front can cause problems.
Gotcha. Okay, so those are the structures. What about the methods for actually launching and growing? You mentioned two main ways.
Yeah, basically two approaches for bringing people in, core to crowd.
Starting with a committed group.
Exactly. An initial group of insiders, early adopters, committed believers, and you expand outward from there.
What are the pros and cons?
Well, advantages are you've got experienced people, maybe financial contributors right away, built-in relationships, if that core group is already part of the target community.
Okay. Downsides.
Downsides. Well, that existing group can bring organizational baggage, unhealthy expectations sometimes. There can be a tendency to focus inward too, and maybe fewer connections to people outside that initial circle.
Right, getting stuck in an echo chamber.
Sort of. The other way is crowd to core.
Starting with the crowd first.
Yep. You start by attracting a broader, maybe unengaged public, and then you build your committed core from within that larger group.
Advantages there.
Big one is freedom. You can design the whole thing with your target cultural group in mind right from the start. You can potentially attract a lot of disconnected people, and there are loads of opportunities for deeper engagement down the line.
Sounds appealing. Challenges.
Challenges are, well, usually a low initial financial base. Fewer volunteers, maybe with prior experience or maturity in the mission. So the founder has to be really intentional about strategies for quick engagement and qualifying the unqualified, as the source puts it, developing new leaders fast.
Okay, core to crowd, crowd to core. Got it. Now this next part about milestones. You said this really resonated.
Oh yeah, big time.
It was this conversation the author David had with Lyle Schaller, a church growth expert back in '96.
That's the one. And Schaller says to him, David, most of you church planters are driven by calendar when you need to be driven by milestones.
Oof, that hits home, doesn't it? For any project, really. Rushing to meet a deadline instead of ensuring you're actually ready.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Launching too early, which, as the document notes, often leads to failure. They mentioned their own experience perfecting crowd to core, but struggling to keep momentum going because they were too focused on the calendar date.
Right. So understanding these milestones is key.
Absolutely critical. And the source really stresses that the founder is crucial here. These milestones are framed as questions the founder must ask themselves to ensure they're building something healthy with real potential.
And you mentioned the idea of readiness. What was it about their definition that stood out?
For me, it was that clear, non-negotiable vision part, especially the examples they gave of founders literally walking away from big funding offers because the partners wanted to change the core vision.
Wow. That takes guts.
It does. It shows it's not just about having a goal, but knowing exactly why you're doing it and who it's for and sticking to that even when it's hard.
Yeah. Holding firm to that identity.
Exactly. And it's not just having the vision, but also having the ability to build the team to actually make it happen.
Right.
Which leads us right into the first milestone.
Milestone number 1. Am I ready to plant? Or, am I ready to launch?
Right. And the source gives 3 key indicators for readiness. First, like we said, that clear, non-negotiable vision, not fuzzy, but specific. I'm launching this thing for these people in this place. Second, the capacity for building teams. Can you actually attract people, both volunteers and paid staff, if needed? The source has this line. When someone is attempting to lead and no one is following, it is a red flag moment.
Huh. Yeah, it's pretty clear. A leader needs followers.
Yep. And third, the ability to raise financial resources. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Those who succeed, they say, have a capacity for raising the resources necessary for the task.
Okay. Vision, team building capacity, fundraising ability. Got it. So, assuming you feel ready, what's next? Teams.
Exactly. Milestone 2. Are my teams in place?
Because it's definitely not a solo mission, right? It's about who you surround yourself with, starting really close to home.
Totally. The document highlights 3 critical teams you need. First, the founder's immediate family or their closest personal support network.
That seems crucial.
They call spousal support, for instance, a knockout factor, like absolutely essential. The whole core support system needs to be on board and feel supported themselves, spiritually, physically, emotionally, financially, all of it.
Yeah, burnout is real if the home base isn't solid.
For sure. Second team. The founder's core ministry or operational team, they stated pretty bluntly, it is never a good idea to go it alone. They even cite historical examples like the Apostle Paul always choosing team members.
Right. Building that core group who will actually do the work.
And third, the initial group of adult investors or key stakeholders. This goes back to Lyle Shaller's idea of needing 30 to 40 adult investors, people who are bought into the vision, maybe from different backgrounds, but they believe in what you're trying to do.
Okay, so your personal support, your core operational team, and your initial backers. That makes sense. Which brings us to
the money.
Milestone 3. Have I solved the resource challenge? Always the elephant in the room for a new venture.
Always. And this milestone tackles it with 3 key questions. First, what will it actually take?
Breaking it down.
Yeah. For most non-home-based ventures, they say you need 3 buckets. A startup budget for one-time costs like equipment or deposits, an ongoing operational budget, and salary support for any full-time team.
Salary support. How much?
They advise it's wise to raise 2 to 3 years of salary support, at least in commitments, up front.
Wow, 2 to 3 years. That's a cushion.
It is. Or they mention bivocationalism as an alternative where the founder or team members have other jobs to cover living expenses.
Right. So what will it take? What's the second question?
How much will it cost? And the short answer they give is...
Let me guess. More than you think.
Bingo. It will cost more than you think.
Yeah.
Factors driving cost up. Cost of living in the area, rent for space, marketing equipment. Location is huge. They mention launching in Manhattan costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah. Also, the type of venture matters. Crowd to core can cost more initially than core to crowd. Targeting the urban poor versus the urban elite changes costs. Home-based is obviously cheaper than needing a big facility. Even the founder's personal debt level plays into the overall financial need.
Okay, so it's complex, but you need a realistic, probably slightly padded budget.
Definitely. Which leads to the third question. Who will pay for it?
The million-dollar question, sometimes literally.
Right. And the source is clear. The founder must take full responsibility for raising financial support. No passing the buck.
Okay. Any tips on how?
They emphasize people give to people. Your closest networks, former colleagues, that's often where initial support comes from. Also, big vision attracts big resources.
Be bold.
Be bold. And don't be afraid to ask you have not, because you ask not. Plus, there's a snowball effect. Money attracts money. Landing credible early partners makes it easier to convince others to jump on board.
Okay, solve the resource challenge, critical milestone. What's next? Location.
You got it. Milestone 4. Have I determined the right place to plant? Or the right market to enter?
Because it's not just what you do, but where, right? You mentioned that alignment factor earlier, how the founder, the team, and the community need to kind of fit culturally?
Exactly. That alignment is key for impact. The source suggests looking for 5 things in a potential place or market.
Okay, whoever.
First, a growing population or growing market segment. Just more opportunity there.
Makes sense.
Second, a changing population or shifting market dynamics. Even if overall growth isn't huge, rapid change like ethnic transitions or new tech adoption curves creates openings for new approaches.
Uh-huh. Find the flux.
Find the flux. Third, an unreached or underserved population or niche. They say you can find unmet needs almost anywhere, but areas with more growth and change often have more of them.
Right. Look for the gaps.
Fourth, a compatible population or customer base. Basically, most founders do best working with people they naturally understand or relate to their tribe, unless they have really strong cross-cultural gifts or experience.
Know thyself, know thy market.
Pretty much. And fifth, a receptive population or market. Trying to find where God is already at work, as they put it in the church context. Where are people actually open to what you're offering, if it's presented in a relevant way?
So receptivity, how do you gauge that?
That's the trick, isn't it? It requires research, listening, maybe some small experiments. But the source says, the more you can answer yes to these 5 questions, growing, changing, unreached, compatible, receptive, the more likely it is that a new venture will have significant impact.
Okay, that's a helpful checklist. Find the right place. Then comes the detailed strategy.
Exactly, which is milestone 5. Do I have a clear vision? And notice the order plays first, then strategy.
Why is that sequence so important for breaking the code?
Because, as they say, for the code to be broken, it is important that the organization be indigenous to its context. You can't just import a strategy. It has to grow out of the soil of that specific place and people.
Context dictates strategy, not the other way around.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So after understanding the place, you develop the 5 components of your overall vision.
Okay, what are those components?
First, values. Your core beliefs driving everything. What really matters. Connecting with unchurched people. Sustainability, innovation.
Got it. The non-negotiables.
Right. Second, vision. The big picture. What will this look like in 20 or 30 years if it succeeds wildly? The long-term dream.
Okay.
Third, mission. What do you actually do day to day? What are you striving for right now? More action-oriented.
Vision is the destination, mission is the journey.
Kinda, yeah. Fourth is strategy. How you'll accomplish the mission. The process, the steps, the plan. Like how will you actually achieve that Acts 2 vision or build those disciples using their examples.
Roadmap.
And finally, results. Short range, practical, measurable goals. And they stress the simpler the better for these, so you can actually track progress and implement effectively.
Values, vision, mission, strategy, results.
Okay.
That makes sense as a framework after you know the context. What's milestone 6?
Milestone 6.
Yeah.
Have I networked my community?
Building awareness, making connections. You mentioned a quote earlier. What niche does this fill? That seems relevant here.
Absolutely. It's about establishing your identity and place within the existing ecosystem. The source describes a whole progression for this networking phase.
Okay, walk me through it.
It starts with, again, reading the culture, figuring out the spiritual or social climate, then creating a positive perception, building credibility, then actively penetrating the social and relational networks that exist.
Getting inside the circles.
Right. Building genuine personal relationships, then inviting people into whatever community or experience you're offering, affirming them, baptizing new believers in their context, and finally sending those engaged people back into their networks with purpose. And they note that the inviting, affirming, baptizing, and sending often line up with the public launch phase.
Okay, so networking is this ongoing process leading up to and through the launch, which brings us to the launch itself.
Milestone 7. Am I ready to go public?
The big day, or the opening week. What goes into this beyond just, picking a date on the calendar?
A lot. This is when the mission really kicks into high gear publicly. Often involves regular gatherings or service offerings, deeper engagement processes, empowering the community. And the practical checklist is huge, depending on the type of organization.
Like where?
Securing the right meeting place or operational space, big venue, small house, office space, key personnel, worship leader, band, programmers, key staff, children's or student programs, if relevant, train volunteers.
A whole infrastructure.
A whole infrastructure.
Yeah.
Equipment, signage, materials, rehearsals, or dry runs, a hospitality or onboarding system. And crucially, solid plans for getting people to come back after that first interaction.
Yeah, that first impression is huge, but follow-up is everything, which actually leads perfectly into the next milestone, the one you said really hit home for you.
Oh yeah, this one is so often overlooked.
The source talks about spending maybe 6 months, even a year, prepping for the public launch. And then realizing they only spent 6 days to prepare for week number 2. What did they miss?
They missed the connection piece.
That anecdote was powerful. The founder watching over 1,000 people visit their new church in the first year.
Yeah.
Scores came, dozens stayed, but most just came, looked, and left. Why? Because they simply did not have an assimilation process to connect them.
Ouch. All that effort to attract them and then no way to keep them engaged.
Exactly. So the final milestone, number 8. Do I have an assimilation process in place?
And the key here is having it in place before you go public. That's what ensures long-term impact, not just a flash in the pan.
So what does good assimilation look like? What are the methods?
The source details several effective ones. One they highlight is the table.
Like literally eating together.
It can be. They talk about its significance in Christ's life, in the early church Eucharist, community, family meals. But it translates to serving refreshments, planning group lunches or dinners, creating spaces for informal connection. They say, do not underestimate the impact the table can have.
Building community through shared experience. I like that. What else?
Tasks. Getting new people involved in simple, meaningful tasks. Not just to get the work done, but as a way for them to belong and contribute.
Gives them ownership.
Right. Also, a newcomer's orientation or welcome session. A clear, non-threatening next step for people who are curious.
Makes sense.
Small groups or interest-based communities, these are seen as hugely positive for connection, but they admit small groups can feel intimidating initially, so you need strategies to make them accessible.
Lowering the barrier to entry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, life development processes, things like classes, workshops, people often see these as a safe next step on mutual court, like neutral ground, where they can learn and engage without high pressure.
Okay, lots of options.
But then they say by far the best means of assimilation is relationships.
Back to people connecting with people.
Always. If people show up because a friend invited them, rather than just seeing an ad, their chances of sticking around and getting truly connected are way, way higher.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to absorb. Models, methods, and 8 really critical milestones.
It is. It's a comprehensive framework.
So if we zoom out, what does this all really mean? We've gone from these big global shifts affecting local communities all the way down to, team building, financial planning, and making sure people don't fall through the cracks after they show up.
Well, connecting it back to that broader picture, this whole planting missional ministries framework, it's really a masterclass in strategic organizational development, isn't it?
Yeah, it really seems like it.
Community engagement, sustainable growth. These principles apply way beyond churches. It's relevant for almost any venture that wants to make a real and textual lasting impact.
So maybe a final thought for listeners to chew on. This whole idea of breaking the code for a specific group. It makes you think. What people groups, population segments, or cultural environments exist in your community or maybe your field of interest that currently feel kind of unreached or underserved by what's already out there?
Good question.
And how could these principles we talked about, really learning the context first, adapting models instead of just copying, prioritizing those relational connections, how could applying those help you break the code and connect with that group in a truly meaningful, impactful way?